The forest moon hung in the sky like a blue-green jewel. Linda Hayes stood outside the research station, watching the sun rise over the strange alien trees. She had been on this moon for 8 months now, studying the creatures that lived in these woods. The air smelled different here, sweeter than Earth air, and the gravity was lighter. Everything felt like a dream. She heard the sound behind her before she saw them. 3 shapes moving through the early morning mist. The cubs came running, their 6 legs moving in perfect rhythm. Blue reached her first, nearly knocking her down with his enthusiasm. Ash and Copper followed close behind, making the rumbling sound that meant they were happy. "Good morning to you too," Linda said, running her hands over Blue's head. The bioluminescent markings along his spine glowed softly in the dim light. These creatures were called Verak by the scientists, but to Linda they were just her boys. Her family. It had been 3 months since she found them. 3 months since that terrible day when she discovered their den destroyed and their mother dead. She could still remember the sound they made, a crying that seemed to pierce right through her heart. Blue had been trying to protect his brothers even though he was injured himself. Copper kept nudging their mother, trying to wake her up. Ash just sat there shaking. Linda had broken every rule that day. Research protocol said never interfere with native life. Her colleague Peter Grant had yelled at her over the radio, told her she was being emotional and unprofessional. But she couldn't leave them there to die. She just couldn't, so she brought them home. She spent weeks in the medical bay, barely sleeping. The cubs had wounds and infections. They were too young to survive on their own. She fed them by hand, cleaned their injuries, stayed awake when they cried in the night. Slowly they got better. Slowly they started to trust her. Peter still said she was making a mistake. He said she was getting too attached. He said they were animals, not children. But Linda knew better. She saw the way they looked at her. She saw how Blue always checked to make sure his brothers were safe. She saw how Copper brought her things he found, gifts. She saw how Ash would curl up beside her when she was sad. These were not simple animals. They were smart. They had feelings. They had souls. Now the cubs followed her everywhere. They slept outside her door at night. They waited for her when she went to work in the lab. They played games and learned tricks and knew their names. Blue was the brave one, always first to investigate new things. Ash was gentle and calm, the peacemaker. Copper was clever and quick, always getting into trouble. Linda walked back toward the station with the cubs following close behind. Inside, Peter was already awake, drinking coffee and looking at data screens. He glanced up when she entered, and his face showed disapproval. "They're getting too big, Linda," he said. "We need to talk about releasing them soon." "They're not ready," Linda replied, pouring her own coffee. "They're still too young to survive without a pack. They're wild animals. They belong in the wild. They're orphans. They belong wherever they're safe and cared for." Peter sighed. This was an old argument between them. "The supply ship is coming next week. Maybe we should send them to a proper facility on Earth, somewhere with experts." Linda felt anger rise in her chest. "I am an expert, and they're not going anywhere." Before Peter could respond, the station's communication system came alive. A voice crackled through the speakers, official and stern. "Research Station Kepler 442C. This is the military vessel Valiant. We are entering orbit now. Prepare for emergency evacuation." Linda and Peter looked at each other in shock. The cubs sensed the tension and moved closer to Linda, pressing against her legs. The voice continued. "This sector has become a war zone. Hostile forces are moving through this area. You have 48 hours to evacuate. A ground team is coming to extract all personnel. Acknowledge." Peter moved to the communication panel. "This is Research Station Kepler 442C. We acknowledge. What about our equipment? Our research? Take only essential personal items. Everything else stays. Valiant out." The silence that followed felt heavy. Linda looked down at the cubs. Blue was looking up at her with his strange, intelligent eyes. He knew something was wrong. "We have to pack," Peter said, already moving toward his quarters. "I'm not leaving them," Linda said quietly. Peter stopped and turned. "Linda, they're not coming with us. You know that. Military transports don't take animals. Then I'm not going. Don't be stupid. There's a war coming. You'll die here." "I won't abandon them, Peter. I won't do to them what the universe already did once." Peter stared at her for a long moment. His expression was a mix of frustration and something that might have been pity. "You're willing to die for 3 animals?" "They're not just animals," Linda said. And yes, I am. The next few hours passed in a blur. Linda packed a small bag but spent most of her time with the cubs, trying to stay calm so they wouldn't panic. They knew something was wrong. They stayed close to her, not playing or exploring like usual. Blue kept looking toward the sky, as if he could sense the ship up there in orbit. When the transport ship came down, it landed in the clearing near the station. Linda watched from the window as the boarding ramp lowered and soldiers came out. They wore combat armor and carried weapons. These were not scientists or diplomats. These were fighters. The leader was a tall man with hard eyes and a scar along his jaw. He walked with the confidence of someone who had seen battle many times. When he entered the station, he looked around with the quick, assessing gaze of a soldier. "I'm Commander Jake Morrison," he said. "I'm here to get you out. We leave in 6 hours. The Krell are 2 days behind us, maybe less. Pack light and be ready." "I'm Dr. Linda Hayes," Linda said. "And I need to discuss the evacuation parameters." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "There are no parameters to discuss. You pack, you board, you leave. Simple. I have 3 Varric cubs that need to come with us." Morrison looked past her to where the cubs were huddled together, watching him with cautious eyes. "Those are local fauna. They stay here. They're orphans under my care. They come with me or I don't go." The commander's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I don't have time for this. The Krell don't take prisoners. They don't show mercy. When they get here, they will destroy everything, including you and your pets." "Then I guess I'm staying," Linda said, crossing her arms. Morrison stared at her. Behind him, his soldiers were watching the exchange with interest. One of them, a woman with sergeant stripes, stepped forward. "Sir, maybe we could make an exception," she said. "They're just cubs." "We don't have space or resources for animals, Chen," Morrison replied. "They're not animals," Linda said again, her voice rising. "They're intelligent beings. They understand. They feel, they love, and I made them a promise when their mother died that I would never abandon them." Peter came out of his quarters then, carrying a bag. "Commander, Dr. Hayes has become emotionally compromised regarding these creatures. I recommend we proceed with evacuation without her consent if necessary." Linda shot Peter a look of betrayal, but before she could speak, something happened that changed everything. The station's alarm began to wail. The computer voice announced calmly, "Unidentified ships entering atmosphere. Multiple contacts. Impact in 3 minutes." Morrison's face went pale. "They're early. The Krell are here." He grabbed his radio. "All units, defensive positions. Get these civilians to the transport now." Linda felt her heart drop. The cubs sensed the danger and began making distressed sounds. Blue moved in front of her protectively. Outside through the window, Linda could see dark shapes in the sky, growing larger. The Krell had arrived and there was nowhere left to run. The first explosion shook the building. Linda grabbed onto a table to keep from falling as the floor tilted beneath her. The cubs scattered, their claws scraping against the metal floor as they tried to find their balance. Blue let out a roar that Linda had never heard before, deep and threatening. "Everyone to the shelter," Morrison shouted, pulling his weapon from its holster. His soldiers were already moving, their training taking over. Sergeant Chen grabbed Peter by the arm and pushed him toward the reinforced section of the building. Another soldier reached for Linda, but Blue stepped between them, his markings flashing bright red. "Call him off," the soldier said, his hand on his weapon. "Don't you dare," Linda warned. She put her hand on Blue's head. "It's okay, boy. It's okay." But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, painting everything in red. Through the windows, Linda could see the Krell ships landing. They were ugly things, all sharp angles and dark metal. Ramps dropped and figures poured out, moving fast toward the research station. Morrison was on his radio, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Valiant, we are under attack. Need immediate extraction." "How copy?" The response was broken by static. "Valiant copies. Cannot land with hostile fire. You need to reach secondary extraction point, 3 kilometers northeast. Forest landing zone. Can you make it?" Morrison looked around at his 5 soldiers, 2 scientists, and 3 large alien cubs. His jaw tightened. "We'll make it. Moving now. Negative on animal transport," the voice from the Valiant added. "Repeat, no animals on military vessels." Morrison didn't respond to that. He was already moving, organizing his soldiers. "Chen White, take point. Patterson and Kyle, rear guard. Dr. Grant, stay in the middle. Dr. Hayes, control your animals or we leave them. Linda wanted to argue, but there was no time. The sound of plasma weapons hitting the station's outer walls was getting louder. She called to the cubs. Blue, Ash, Copper, come, stay close. They moved as a group toward the back exit. Morrison's soldiers were professionals, moving quickly but carefully, weapons ready. Peter was pale and shaking, but he kept up. The cubs stayed right beside Linda, their bodies tense and ready. They made it out of the building just as the front wall exploded inward. The night air was full of smoke and the smell of burning metal. In the distance, Linda could hear alien voices, harsh and angry. The Krell were coming. Move, move, Morrison urged, pushing them toward the tree line. The forest was dark and thick, full of shadows. Normally, Linda would have been cautious going in there at night, but now it offered cover. They plunged into the trees just as plasma fire lit up the clearing behind them. The forest was different at night. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Bioluminescent plants gave off a soft glow, just enough to see by. The cubs seemed more at ease here, their steps sure and confident. This was their home after all. They moved for 20 minutes following Morrison's compass. The sounds of the attack on the station grew quieter behind them. Linda was breathing hard, not used to this kind of physical effort. Peter was doing worse, gasping and stumbling. One of the soldiers, a young man named Danny White, helped him along. Then Copper stopped. The smallest cub went rigid, his head turning toward something in the darkness. He made a low sound, almost a growl, but not quite. Blue and Ash immediately moved to flank Linda, their bodies forming a protective circle around her. What is it? Morrison whispered, raising his weapon. Linda put her hand on Blue's back. She could feel him trembling, every muscle tight. They sensed something. I've got movement, Sergeant Chen said, checking her scanner. Multiple contacts. Coming fast from the east. Krell hunting party, Morrison said. They're tracking us. Everyone down. They dropped into the undergrowth. Linda pulled the cubs down with her, praying they would stay quiet. Through the trees, she could see lights moving. The Krell carried glowing devices that cast a blue light through the forest. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more. The Krell were talking in their language, harsh clicking sounds that made Linda's skin crawl. They were spreading out, searching. One of them was coming directly toward their hiding spot. Morrison hand-signaled to his team. They were going to have to fight. There was no way around it. The soldiers raised their weapons, taking aim. The Krell was 10 meters away, then 5. Blue exploded from the undergrowth with a roar. The Krell didn't have time to react before the cub slammed into him, 6 legs and pure muscle knocking the alien to the ground. Ash and Copper followed their brother, attacking with a ferocity that shocked everyone. The element of surprise gave them an advantage, but it didn't last long. The other Krell opened fire. Morrison's team returned fire, the forest lighting up with plasma bolts. Linda pressed herself to the ground, covering her head. She could hear the cubs fighting, their roars mixing with the alien shouts. Fall back, Morrison yelled. Fighting retreat. Move. They scrambled backward through the forest, firing as they went. The cubs were ahead of them now, moving with them. Linda saw Blue take a hit, saw him stumble. Without thinking, she ran to him. The cub was trying to get up, his left side smoking from the plasma burn. No, 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 Linda said, reaching him. She grabbed him, tried to help him stand. He was heavy, so heavy, but she couldn't leave him. Sergeant Chen appeared beside her. I've got him. You run. Together they got Blue moving. Ash and Copper circled back, staying close to their injured brother. The Krell were pursuing, but the forest slowed them down. The cubs seemed to know every path, every shortcut. They led the group deeper into the woods, away from their hunters. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes, Morrison called a halt. They were in a small clearing surrounded by dense vegetation. It would have to do. Morrison set his soldiers in defensive positions while Linda examined Blue's injury. The plasma burn was bad, cutting deep into his flesh. She pulled medical supplies from her bag, her hands shaking as she worked. How bad? Morrison asked, kneeling beside her. Bad enough. He needs proper medical treatment. I can stabilize him, but we need to get to that extraction point. That's still 2.5 kilometers away. Can he walk? Linda looked into Blue's eyes. The cub was in pain, but he was watching her with complete trust. He'll walk. He won't leave me, and I won't leave him. Morrison nodded slowly. He was starting to understand something. Linda could see it in his face. Why did they attack the cubs? They could have stayed hidden. They were protecting us. Protecting me. Linda continued working on Blue's wound, cleaning and bandaging it. That's what family does. They're animals. They're my family. Peter was sitting against a tree, looking terrible. This is insane. We're going to die because you won't leave them behind. We're going to die if we keep arguing, Chen said sharply. The Krell are still out there. We need to keep moving. Morrison made a decision. We rest for 10 minutes. Then we move. Dr. Hayes, can you make a stretcher for the injured cub? Linda looked up at him, surprised. You're taking him? I'm taking all of you. We make it together or we don't make it at all. That's how my team works. He looked at the cubs, at how Ash and Copper were pressed against their injured brother. Besides, they saved us back there. They bought us time to escape. Far as I'm concerned, that makes them part of the team. Linda felt tears in her eyes but blinked them away. This was not the time to cry. She pulled off her jacket and used some support poles from the research equipment in her bag to fashion a simple stretcher. It wasn't much, but it would help. As she worked, she talked to Blue quietly. You're going to be okay. I promise. We're going to get you home. All of us together. The cub made a soft sound, almost like he understood. He licked her hand once, gentle despite his pain. Morrison checked his compass. All right, people. Let's move out. Stay alert. Stay together. We've got a long walk ahead of us. The forest was darker now, the bioluminescent plants fewer and farther between. Linda walked beside Blue's makeshift stretcher, which 2 soldiers carried between them. Ash and Copper walked on either side of their brother, never straying more than a few steps away. Every few minutes one of them would lean down and touch their nose to Blue's head, checking on him. The group moved slowly, carefully. Every sound in the forest made them freeze and listen. The Krell were still out there somewhere, hunting them. Morrison kept checking his scanner, his face tense in the dim light. They had been walking for an hour when Copper suddenly stopped. His ears went back and his markings started flashing in a pattern Linda recognized. Danger. Close. Down, Morrison hissed. Everyone dropped. The soldiers carrying Blue lowered the stretcher as gently as they could. In the silence, Linda could hear it. The sound of something moving through the brush. Something big. 3 Krell soldiers emerged from the trees ahead of them. They hadn't seen the humans yet, but they would any second. Morrison made a quick hand signal. His soldiers understood immediately. They had to take these enemies out silently, or the noise would bring more. But before Morrison could give the attack order, Copper moved. The small cub was the fastest of the 3, and he used that speed now. He darted forward, low to the ground, and hit the closest Krell from behind. The alien went down with barely a sound. Ash followed, taking down another. The 3rd Krell raised his weapon, but Sergeant Chen was faster. Her plasma shot took him in the chest. He fell without making a sound. Morrison looked at the cubs with new respect. They're natural hunters. They're survivors, Linda corrected. They learned young that the world is dangerous. They kept moving. The forest seemed endless, full of strange shapes and shadows. Peter was struggling now, his breath coming in gasps. Danny White practically had to carry him. Linda was exhausted too, her legs aching and her feet blistered in her boots. But she kept going. For Blue, for all of them. After another hour, Morrison called another halt. We need rest. 10 minutes. Everyone collapsed where they stood. Linda went to Blue immediately, checking his bandage. The bleeding had stopped, but the cub was weak. She gave him water from her canteen, and he drank gratefully. Ash and Copper curled up next to him, their warmth helping to keep him stable. Morrison sat down beside Linda. His face was tired, older than it had seemed at the research station. Tell me about them, he said quietly. How did this happen? How did you end up with 3 alien cubs who act like trained soldiers? Linda smiled sadly. I didn't train them. They just are who they are. She stroked Blue's head. I found them 3 months ago. Their den had been attacked. Their mother was dead. They were so small, so scared. Blue here. He was trying to protect his brothers even though he was hurt. Copper kept trying to wake their mother up. Ash just sat there shaking. So you took them in. I couldn't leave them. My colleague, Peter, he said I was breaking protocol. He said I was being too emotional. Maybe he was right. But I saw myself in them, I think. What do you mean? Linda was quiet for a moment. I lost my family 7 years ago. Colony disaster. Equipment failure. 300 people died in 15 minutes when the life support failed. I was off planet for a conference. I came home to nothing. No parents, no brothers, no home. I know what it's like to be alone in the universe, to have everything taken from you in an instant. Morrison nodded slowly. I lost my team 2 years ago. Krell ambush. I was the only one who made it out. How? I followed orders. Command told us to retreat, and I retreated. My team leader stayed behind to cover us. He died so I could live. Morrison's voice was hard. I've carried that guilt every day since. That wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I lived, they didn't. Linda looked at him. Is that why you agreed to bring the Cubs? Because you couldn't save your team, but you can save us? Morrison met her eyes. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of leaving people behind. Sergeant Chen appeared out of the darkness. Sir, we've got a problem. My scanner is showing multiple contacts. A lot of them. Moving in a search pattern. Morrison stood up quickly. How many? At least 20. Maybe more. They're between us and the extraction point. Can we go around? Not without adding several hours to our journey. And we don't have several hours. The Valiant leaves at dawn with or without us, Morrison cursed under his breath. He looked at his small team, at the wounded Cub, at the exhausted civilians. They couldn't fight 20 Krell, they would be slaughtered. There has to be another way, Linda said. There isn't. We either fight through or we don't make it. Morrison checked his weapon. We'll wait until they pass, then move fast. With luck, we can slip through before they realize we're there. But luck wasn't with them that night. As they waited in the darkness, one of the Krell patrols came too close. A scout spotted them and raised an alarm. The sound echoed through the forest, harsh and terrible. Run! Morrison shouted. Everyone move, now. They ran, crashing through the undergrowth. Linda tried to help with Blue's stretcher, but it was too awkward, too slow. Behind them, she could hear the Krell responding to the alarm, dozens of them converging on their position. We can't outrun them, Chen said, breathing hard. Morrison knew she was right. He looked around, found a small rise with some rocks for cover. Here, we make our stand here. Defensive positions. His soldiers moved quickly, finding cover and setting up fields of fire. Peter was crying now, curled up behind a rock. Danny White tried to comfort him, but there wasn't much to say. They all knew what was coming. Linda crouched beside the Cubs. Blue tried to stand, but he was too weak. Ash and Copper positioned themselves in front of their brother, ready to defend him. Linda pulled out the only weapon she had, a small plasma cutter from her research kit. It wasn't much, but it was something. If this is it, she said to the Cubs, I want you to know I don't regret anything. You three are the best thing that happened to me in a long time. I'm proud to have been your family. Blue made a soft sound and pushed his head against her hand. The other Cubs did the same. For a moment it was almost peaceful. Just a woman and her Cubs together at the end. Then the Krell came. They poured out of the forest like a wave, at least 30 of them. Morrison's team opened fire, their plasma weapons lighting up the night. The Krell fired back and the air filled with deadly light. Linda saw Ash take a hit. The Cub stumbled but kept fighting. Copper was darting in and out, using his speed to confuse the enemy. Linda herself was firing her plasma cutter, not really aiming, just trying to keep the Krell back. A Krell soldier broke through the line, heading straight for her. Linda raised her cutter, knowing it was too late. But Blue, despite his injuries, lunged forward. The Cub hit the Krell hard, knocking him down. Blue's jaws closed on the alien's throat. Blue, no! Linda screamed, but the Cub was past hearing. He was protecting his family, no matter the cost. More Krell were coming. Morrison was yelling orders, but Linda couldn't hear him over the sound of weapons fire. She saw Danny White go down, hit in the leg. Chen dragged him behind cover, still firing. Peter was screaming, his hands over his head. This was it. This was the end. Linda pulled the Cubs close to her, all 3 of them now preparing for the final attack. And then something happened that none of them expected. Copper started making a sound. It was deep, resonating unlike anything Linda had heard before. It seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Ash joined in, and then Blue, despite his weakness. The 3 Cubs sang together, a song that was old and wild and full of meaning Linda didn't understand. The Krell hesitated, confused by the sound, and from the forest came an answer. It started as a rumble so low Linda felt it more than heard it. Then it grew louder, a chorus of voices joining the Cubs' song. The trees themselves seemed to shake with the sound. Eyes appeared in the darkness. Dozens of them, then hundreds glowing with bioluminescent light. The adult Varak had arrived. They came out of the forest like a force of nature, massive and terrible. The lead Varak was enormous, her markings indicating great age and authority. She looked at the Krell, at the humans, at the 3 cubs pressed against Linda. Then she looked at Linda. The woman and the alien matriarch locked eyes. Linda didn't move, didn't breathe. She just met the creature's gaze with all the courage she had left. The matriarch moved forward slowly. She lowered her massive head until she was level with Linda. Then gently she touched her forehead to the human woman's head. In that moment, Linda understood. The cubs had called for help and their people had answered. And somehow the matriarch understood what Linda had done. She had saved 3 cubs, had protected them, had refused to abandon them even when it meant her death. The matriarch pulled back and turned to face the Krell. Her roar shook the forest. The other Varak answered, and then they charged. The battle was like nothing Linda had ever seen. The adult Varak moved through the Krell forces like water through a dam, unstoppable and fierce. They were bigger than the cubs, some of them twice the size of earth bears with powerful muscles and claws that could tear through armor. But it wasn't just their size that made them deadly. They fought with intelligence, with coordination. They moved in groups, flanking and surrounding the Krell soldiers. They used the terrain to their advantage, attacking from the shadows and disappearing before the Krell could respond. Morrison and his soldiers stopped firing, watching in awe. The Krell were retreating now, trying to escape back into the forest. But the Varak were everywhere. The aliens didn't stand a chance. In less than 5 minutes, it was over. The Krell who weren't dead were running, scrambling to get away from the Varak. The adult creatures let them go, satisfied with driving them off. They turned back to where the humans waited, dozens of massive predators surrounding the small group. Linda should have been terrified. Any sane person would be, but she wasn't, because Blue, Ash, and Copper were running forward to meet the adults, calling out in their language. The adult Varak surrounded the cubs, sniffing them, checking them for injuries. It was a reunion, Linda realized. These weren't just random creatures. This was their family, their pack. The matriarch approached Linda again. Up close, the creature was enormous. She could kill Linda with one swipe of her paw, but she moved gently, carefully. She sniffed Linda, learning her scent. Then she looked at Blue's injuries, at the bandage Linda had made. The matriarch made a sound, soft and questioning. Linda didn't speak Varak, but somehow she understood. The creature was asking how Blue got hurt, who had cared for him. "I did," Linda said quietly. "I've been caring for all 3 of them, since their mother died." The matriarch tilted her head, listening to the tone if not the words. Linda slowly reached out her hand, giving the creature time to move away if she wanted. The matriarch didn't move. Linda placed her hand on the massive head, feeling the warmth of the living creature beneath her palm. "I know you don't understand me," Linda said, "but I need your help. Blue needs a doctor. We all need to get to safety. There's a place not far from here where we can escape. Can you help us get there?" The matriarch pulled back and looked at Linda for a long moment. Then she turned and made a series of sounds to the other Varak. Several of the younger adults came forward, lowering themselves to the ground. "I think she wants us to ride them," Chen said, her voice filled with disbelief. Morrison approached Linda. "Can we trust them? They just saved our lives." "Yes, we can trust them." Linda helped Blue onto the back of one of the adults, a smaller female who moved carefully with the injured cub. Ash and Copper jumped onto other Varak with ease. The matriarch lowered herself in front of Linda, a clear invitation. Linda climbed on, gripping the creature's thick fur. The matriarch stood, and suddenly Linda was several feet off the ground. It was both terrifying and amazing. The soldiers helped Peter onto another Varak, though he looked like he might faint. Danny White, injured but alive, climbed on with Chen's help. Morrison and his other soldiers mounted their own Varak, weapons still ready but no longer aimed at the creatures. The matriarch started moving, and the other Varak followed. They moved fast through the forest, faster than the humans could have ever walked. The ride was rough, but Linda held on tight, trusting the creature beneath her. The journey that would have taken hours on foot took less than 30 minutes riding the Varak. The forest opened up into a clearing, and Linda could see lights in the distance. The extraction point. They had made it. The Varak stopped at the edge of the clearing. The matriarch lowered herself, and Linda slid off. The other humans dismounted as well, everyone except Peter looking amazed by what had just happened. "Thank you," Linda said to the matriarch. She knew the creature didn't understand English, but maybe she understood gratitude. "Thank you for saving us. Thank you for your cubs." The matriarch made a soft sound and touched Linda's head with her nose one more time. Then she called to the other Varak. They started to leave, melting back into the forest. "No, wait," Linda called. Blue, Ash, and Copper were leaving with them. The cubs looked back at her, confused. Linda ran forward, but Morrison caught her arm. "Linda, they're going home. They're going with their own kind. But they're not ready. Blue is still injured. They need me. They need their family. Their real family." Linda felt tears streaming down her face. After everything, after all they had been through together, was this how it ended? With the cubs just walking away? But then Blue stopped. The injured cub turned around and started walking back toward Linda. Ash and Copper followed their brother. The matriarch watched but didn't stop them. The three cubs reached Linda and pressed against her, making soft sounds. Linda dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around all three of them. "I don't want to leave you," she said through her tears, "but you need to stay here where you belong, where you're safe." Blue pushed his head against her chest, right over her heart. Ash and Copper did the same. They weren't leaving. They had made their choice. The matriarch approached again. She looked at her cubs, then at Linda, then back at the cubs. She seemed to be having some kind of internal debate. Finally, she made a decision. She called out to the other Varak and started walking toward the extraction point into the clearing. "What's she doing?" Morrison asked. "I think she's giving us permission," Linda said. "Permission to take them with us." The transport ship was landing now, its engines roaring. The pilot's voice came over Morrison's radio. "Commander, we need to load and leave now. Krell ships are 3 minutes out." Morrison looked at Linda, at the cubs, at the matriarch watching from the forest edge. He made a decision. "Load everyone, including the cubs." "Sir, regulations say no animals." "These aren't animals," Morrison said firmly. "They're allied combatants who helped us survive. They're coming with us." "That's an order." The loading ramp dropped. Morrison's soldiers moved quickly, helping the wounded aboard. Linda guided the cubs up the ramp. They were nervous about the ship, about the noise and the strange smells, but they trusted Linda. They followed her inside. Just before the ramp closed, Linda looked back at the forest. The matriarch was still there, watching. Linda raised her hand in farewell. The matriarch raised one massive paw in what might have been an answer, then disappeared into the trees. The ramp sealed shut. The ship lifted off, and through the window Linda could see the forest falling away below them. The cubs pressed against her, scared of the movement and the noise. She held them close. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're going home. All of us together." The ship broke atmosphere and entered space. Through the window, Linda could see the Krell ships in the distance, but they were too late. The transport was too fast. They had escaped. Morrison came and sat beside Linda. His face was tired but satisfied. "That was the strangest mission I've ever been on." "Thank you," Linda said, "for bringing them. I know it was against regulations." "Regulations are made by people who weren't there," Morrison said. "I was there. I saw what those cubs did. I saw what you did. As far as I'm concerned, you all earned a place on this ship." The cubs were calming down now, getting used to the movement of the ship. Blue's eyes were closed, exhausted from his injuries and the long journey. Ash and Copper curled up on either side of their brother, protective even in sleep. "What happens when we get to the Valiant?" Linda asked. "What happens to them?" Morrison was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. That's above my level. But I'll make sure my report shows exactly what happened. How they saved us. How you refused to abandon them. Maybe that will be enough. And if it's not, then we'll figure something out. You didn't give up on them before, and I won't let you down now." Linda looked down at the sleeping cubs. They looked peaceful, safe. For the first time in days, she felt like maybe things would be okay. The transport docked with the Valiant 30 minutes later. As the airlock opened, Linda could see soldiers waiting. And beyond them, officers in neat uniforms. This was going to be complicated. The medical bay of the Valiant was clean and bright, so different from the dark forest they had left behind. Linda sat beside Blue as the ship's doctor worked on his injuries. The doctor was a middle-aged woman named Susan Porter, and she worked carefully, not showing any fear of the large alien creature on her examination table. "The wound is deep, but clean," Dr. Porter said. Whoever did the first aid knew what they were doing. He should make a full recovery. Thank you, Linda said, relief flooding through her. She had been so worried, so afraid that Blue wouldn't make it. Ash and Copper sat nearby watching their brother with concerned eyes. Every few minutes, one of them would make a soft sound and Blue would answer weakly. They were talking to each other, Linda realized. Comforting each other. The door to the medical bay opened and a stern-looking woman in a captain's uniform entered. This was Captain Helen Price, commander of the Valiant. She looked at the cubs with an expression that was hard to read. Dr. Hayes, I need to speak with you, the captain said. Linda stood up, her heart sinking. This was it. This was where they would tell her the cubs had to go back. They moved to a small office off the medical bay. Morrison was already there, standing at attention. Captain Price sat behind the desk and gestured for Linda to sit as well. Commander Morrison has filed his report, the captain began. It's quite a story. Alien cubs, Varric pack assistance, interspecies cooperation. She paused. It's also a story that involves multiple regulation violations. Captain, if I may, Morrison started, but Price held up her hand. I'm not finished. Commander. She looked at Linda. Dr. Hayes, you brought unauthorized biological specimens onto a military vessel. You refused a direct evacuation order. You put yourself and others at risk for 3 animals. They're not animals, Linda said quietly. Excuse me? Linda met the captain's eyes. They're not animals. They're intelligent beings. They understand, they feel. They love and protect and sacrifice. They saved our lives multiple times. Blue got injured protecting me. All 3 of them called for help from their pack when we were surrounded. They're not pets or specimens. They're people, just not human people. Captain Price was quiet for a long moment. The regulations are very clear. No unauthorized biological specimens. Then arrest me, Linda said. Court-martial me. Do whatever you have to do. But I won't send them back. I made them a promise when their mother died that I would never abandon them. And I keep my promises, even if it means the end of your career, especially then. What's a career worth if you have to become a different person to keep it? If I abandon them now, I won't be able to live with myself. I've lost everything once before. I know what it's like. I won't do that to them. The captain leaned back in her chair. Commander Morrison says something similar in his report. He says the cubs demonstrated tactical awareness and loyalty equivalent to trained military animals. He's requesting they be classified as allied combatants under Regulation 773. Linda looked at Morrison in surprise. He gave her a small nod. That's a very creative interpretation of the regulations, Captain Price said. Allied combatants are usually soldiers from friendly alien species, not animals. They're not animals, Morrison said firmly. I saw what they did, Captain. They coordinated attacks. They called for reinforcements. They protected the wounded. Those aren't the actions of simple animals. Those are the actions of thinking beings. Captain Price stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars streamed by as the ship traveled through space. This is going to cause problems. Big problems. The science community will want to study them. The military will want to use them. Politicians will argue about it for months. Let them argue, Linda said. As long as the cubs are safe, I don't care what anyone says. The captain turned back to face them. I'm going to make a decision that will probably end my career just like it might end yours. I'm classifying the cubs as medical patients under Dr. Hayes' care. They need treatment and observation. By the time we reach Earth Station, maybe we'll have figured out what to do with them permanently. Linda felt hope bloom in her chest. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. There will be hearings, investigations. You'll have to prove that keeping them is worth all this trouble. I will. However long it takes. The next few weeks were strange. Linda lived in the medical bay with the cubs while Blue recovered. The crew was curious about them, and slowly soldiers started visiting. At first they came to see the strange aliens, but then they started to see what Linda saw. They saw how Copper would bring Blue food when he was too weak to get it himself. They saw how Ash would curl up with scared crew members who had nightmares about the Krell attack. They saw how all 3 cubs would stand guard when Linda slept, never leaving her side. Sergeant Chen became a regular visitor, bringing treats and playing with the cubs. Danny White, recovering from his leg injury, spent hours with them. Even Peter, who had opposed the cubs from the beginning, started to change his mind. I was wrong about them, he admitted to Linda one day. They're not just animals. I can see that now. I'm sorry I didn't see it before. You were scared, Linda said. Fear makes us all see things wrong sometimes. When the Valiant finally reached Earth Station, news crews were waiting. The story had leaked somehow. The woman who saved alien cubs, the cubs who saved her back. It was the kind of story that captured people's imaginations. Linda was nervous as she walked off the ship with the cubs beside her. Cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions. But Morrison and his team surrounded her, keeping the crowd back. Captain Price made a statement about ongoing investigations and medical care. The hearing started a week later. Linda sat in a room full of officials and scientists and military officers with the cubs at her side. They asked her questions for hours. Why did she break protocol? Why did she risk lives? Why should the cubs be allowed to stay? Linda answered every question honestly. She told them about finding the cubs orphaned and wounded. She told them about the Krell attack and the Verak rescue. She told them about the bond she had formed with 3 creatures who trusted her completely. But why won't they leave your side? One official asked. It was the question everyone wanted answered. They're with their own kind now, safe and cared for. Why do they stay with you? Linda looked down at Blue, who was resting his head on her lap. Ash and Copper were pressed against her legs, as they always were. She thought about her answer carefully. Because I never abandoned theirs, she said finally. When they were alone and scared and hurt, when the universe had taken everything from them, I was there. I didn't leave when it was hard. I didn't give up when people told me to. I stayed because they needed me. They know that. They remember it. And they stay because love recognizes love, no matter what form it takes. She looked up at the officials. They stay because I prove that when I say family, I mean it forever. Not just when it's convenient. Not just when it's easy, forever. That's what family means. That's what loyalty means. And if we as humans can't understand that, if we can't respect it, then we're the ones who are less intelligent. Not them. The room was silent. Then one of the officials, an older man with kind eyes, spoke up. What would you propose we do, Dr. Hayes? Create a new program. Interspecies guardianship. Let me return to that moon. Let me establish a research station focused on building relationships with the Verak, not just studying them. The cubs can be ambassadors. They can show both species that cooperation is possible. The officials looked at each other. There were whispered conversations. Finally, the lead official spoke. We need time to consider this. We'll make our decision within the week. That week was the longest of Linda's life. She stayed at a temporary facility with the cubs waiting. Morrison visited often, bringing news and support. The story had gone public now, and people from all over Earth were sending messages of support. Finally, the call came. Linda was to appear before the council one more time. She walked into the room with the cubs beside her, ready to fight for them one more time if she had to. But the lead official was smiling. Dr. Hayes, the council has made its decision. We are approving the interspecies guardianship program. You will be assigned to establish the first human-Verak relations station on the forest moon. The cubs will remain in your care as ambassadors and research subjects. Linda felt tears streaming down her face. Thank you. Thank you so much. There are conditions, of course. Regular reports, oversight, safety protocols. But we believe this could be the beginning of something important, not just for humans and Verak, but for all species. You've shown us that the bonds of compassion and loyalty are truly universal. 6 months later, Linda stood outside her new research station on the forest moon. It was bigger than the old one, better equipped. Behind her, the cubs played in the clearing. They were almost fully grown now, magnificent and powerful. But they still followed her everywhere, still slept outside her door, still brought her gifts from the forest. Morrison came to visit, as he did every few months. They watched the sunset together while the cubs wrestled playfully nearby. You did it, Morrison said. You changed everything. We did it, Linda corrected. You could have left us behind. You didn't. I learned something from you that day in the forest. About loyalty. About family. About what really matters. He smiled. My therapist says I'm finally letting go of the guilt about my old team. Says I'm learning that survival isn't betrayal. That's good. They would want you to live well. Yeah, they would. Young Verak from the forest started coming to the station regularly now, curious about the strange humans and their adopted cubs. Linda was learning their language, slowly building bridges between species. It was hard work, but it was good work. As the sun set, The cubs came and settled around Linda as they always did. Blue rested his massive head on her lap. Ash pressed against her side. Copper curled up at her feet. This was home. This was family. A young reporter had asked her recently why the cubs never left her side. Why they stayed when they could be free in the forest. Linda had given the same answer she always gave, the answer that had become famous across human space. Because I never abandoned theirs. It was a simple truth, but it was complete. In a universe full of complexity and conflict, sometimes the most important things were the simplest. Love, loyalty, family, the promises we keep and the bonds we choose. Linda looked up at the stars and thought about how far she had come. From a broken woman who had lost everything to someone who had found a new family, in the most unexpected place. The cubs had saved her just as much as she had saved them. That was the real story. Not about a human and 3 aliens, but about how love transcends all boundaries when we let it. About how family is defined not by blood or species, but by the choices we make and the promises we keep. And as the night fell over the forest moon, Linda smiled. She was home. They all were.